Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to talk about variable movement rates in our war games. So how do you feel about random movement distances being applied to figures in a war game? So lots of rule systems have fixed movement distances for different troop types, and the player can generally move up to the amount stated. But it's also becoming common, certainly in the rules that I've encountered, to see rules that have some element of random movement distance, where you dice perhaps for the exact distance covered or for extra distance covered. And of course most rules also include movement modifiers for crossing difficult terrain or linear obstacles, but today I'm specifically discussing variable movement rates for similar troop types over similar terrain. So I'm going to briefly discuss some of what I see as the quick pros and cons of variable movement as I see them, and then I will look at a few examples that I've encountered before in my usual, before I send out my usual call for your opinions. So from the pros column, one of the obvious ones that would be the exception is that no one moves at the same speed. A group may have an average speed, but individuals within that group may be faster or slower. Rules of course take large terrain features into effect when determining the speed of the unit, but what about those micro elements that impact on speed? And by this I mean, that small patch of soft ground or trip hazards that affect only part of a unit but are not represented on the table because they're tiny, but can slow down a formed unit trying to maintain its formation. Well-organised ranks of troops can quickly become disorganised if they do not try to coordinate as a group, and that inevitably slows them down compared to, say, open order or skirmish troops. In essence, they will move at the speed of their slowest component, especially if the unit consists of poorly trained militia or conscript troops. Now, a small amount of variable movement may therefore be more realistic, perhaps, to represent those micro-terrain challenges for such units, something certainly to consider. And variability also means unpredictability for the players. A certain amount of friction in a war game is good because it creates tension and poses challenges for the players. Being unable to calculate precisely where a unit is going to end its movement adds an extra layer of unpredictability that can create headaches and challenges for the wargamer, and therefore makes for more interesting games. All of which leads neatly to the downsides of variable movement. First, it is an added mechanic, one more step to take, and therefore adding time that could be spent fighting. Most rules will therefore average out all of this as a simple flat movement rate for different troop types. It's not 100% accurate, but wargaming isn't a simulation, and we've already sacrificed some realism in our rules for playability, so why not with the movement? So now I'm going to look at a couple of examples from my own gaming that may help to illustrate some of the pros and cons as I see them. At Reject HQ, Stuart has a very simple but effective set of house rules that he uses for the French-Indian Wars. Different troop types have fixed movement distances, but have the option of adding an extra D4 inches if they want to run, slightly longer if they're Indian troops. There is of course a cost for this, as they can take fewer actions like reloading while running. It's a tactical choice for the players to consider, and means that some troops, particularly Indians, can choose to move very fast indeed compared to other troops over several turns. Of course, here we're talking about a set of large-scale skirmish rules, and of course individuals move individually, so some members of a unit may move faster than others. However, when drilled troops form into line in this set of rules, they do move as a group, as you would expect, and usually this means a fixed movement rate. Now, a different example of variable movement would be the test of resolve rules, which I've been using for Wars of the Roses. I mean, in this case, units roll a d12 for their movement, with some faster troop types having fixed additional amounts of movement added. So, for instance, light cavalry or scurriers gain a +4 inches to their roll, so their movement can be anything from 5 inches up to as much as 16 inches. Of course, this produces a really wide range of movement rates between similar units, but these are only maximum distances. Obviously you can choose not to move the full distance that's diced for. In many cases the player is advised indeed not to move the full distance to maintain cohesion within larger formations, the battles. so that all of the different companies move at the same rate. I mean, this accurately represents poorly drilled mass formations of the time, which can lose speed in order to maintain formation and cohesion. In short, they generally move at the pace of the slowest members of the group. So what do you think about the use of variable movement rates in wargaming? You know, I'm genuinely interested because I've played both types of systems and I'm quite happy to switch between the two depending on the rule set. Do you have a particular set of rules that use variable movement that you would really like, or that you really hate for that, for that very reason? I'd always, as always, I'd love to hear what you think and learn from your experiences in the comments below. So time for a hobby update. This weekend Postage Rejects will actually be gathering physically in the Shed of War for one of our regular games hosted by Stuart. However, earlier in the week 4 of the Rejects got together online for yet another amazing game hosted by Jonathan Freitag in the US over Zoom. We were playing the Battle of Madonna dell'Olmo, which took place in 1744, and managed to get the whole game wrapped up in about 4 hours of gameplay over Zoom. The Battle of Madonna dell'Olmo is sometimes known as the Battle of Cuneo and was fought on the outskirts of the city of Cuneo on the 30th September 1744 during the War of the Austrian Succession. The battle ended in a victory for the armies of Spain and France over the Kingdom of Sardinia, but success did not advance the victor's campaign. So as for those of you that are not aware, here is a little background, and apologies to those who do know the campaign well, because this brief summary is a very brief and does leave out quite a lot of detail because there isn't really time for all of it. There was much disagreement in the campaign aims, but in the end the Galispian army, that's the French under Conti and Spain under Lamina, agreed to take the war into Piedmont in Italy. Crossing the Alps and descending into Piedmont, the Galipians won some victories in the approach to Cuneo, where they hoped to overwinter before the spring campaign of 1745. Standing in their way was the Piedmontese army under King Emmanuel III. With Cuneo besieged, the king had to act to relieve the defenders, and he decided to draw the Galispians into pitched battle to allow time for supplies to be dispatched into Cuneo and for evacuation of the wounded. As long as the Galispians could be engaged in battle without knowledge of his other goals, the king could snatch a strategic victory without actually needing to win the battle itself. Cutting the Galispians' lines of communication and reinforced and resupplied Cuneo with winter approaching, the Galispian army would be compelled to break off the siege and retire back into France. Now, as with the historic engagement, our battle was dictated by the landscape, and in particular a sunken road which was a serious impediment to movement across half of the Piedmontese army's front. The battle began around noon, with the main focus of the fighting around Madonna dell'Olmo, but with both sides shifting forces around that sunken road and into the centre. Both historically and in our battle, there was heavy fighting around the town of Madonna dell'Olmo, and neither side made much headway. Eventually, King Emmanuel called off the attack and retired, but this battle had allowed time for the siege works around Cuneo to be destroyed, the garrison reinforced, and the city resupplied. The Galispian army was therefore forced to lift the siege and retire. Now, our game saw myself and Steve as the Piedmontese, with Sergit and Richard as the Galispian commanders. The tension mounted throughout the game, along with the casualties, with some spectacular dice rolls, good and bad on both sides. The end result was a mutually agreed minor victory for the Piedmontese in what had been a very, very attritional engagement. It would have been nice to swap sides and go again, but we wouldn't have been able to gather a game like this for several weeks, and we all agreed we didn't want to hog Jonathan's table, want him to be able to get on and do his next shared game that he's going to get other groups to play. So he's promised us a bit of that action, a bit of Punic Wars action next time we can gather, and we're all looking forward to that. Now, the other project that's been taking up my time over the last week has been reviewing the On Bloody Ground rules by Wargames and Miniatures. I was sent a couple of their rulebooks and a handful of models to review, and I wanted to get that done this week because I'm going away next weekend and I know I'm tight for time. My flip through look at the rule books came out on Friday, and my video of the miniatures will be out next week, again on Friday next week. I've really enjoyed getting a chance to have an in-depth look at a set of rules that I've heard about but not really seen in detail until now. So please check out my video from Friday. It's quite a long one by my standards, coming in at over half an hour, but hopefully I've gone into enough detail so that you get a really good idea of what's inside the rule books, the information that's in there, and a good look at the pictures and the graphics. Now, I know that when I've been looking for rules, this sort of flip through review has been really helpful in my decision to buy or not to buy. So I hope my look at the On Bloody Ground rules proves equally useful to anyone wanting to play the two periods that they currently have covered. So that's the late Dark Ages through to the Norman invasion or the early 11th century Spain through El Cid to the fall of the Almohad Empire in the 13th century. So a quick workbench update. Now, I've been working on some 1200th scale ships from Ark Royal Miniatures, which you can see on the table here. They're part of a batch of models that I bought last year from Barry Hilton. So a bit of background here. In July last year, he came down from his wild northern home to visit the southeast, and in particular take part in the Rapture Gaming Festival at Chatham Dock. The rejects joined him for both days of the show to play his Mad for War rules and the raid on Chatham by the Dutch in 1667. We all had such a good time, we immediately bought a load of the models and the rules, and now, although I painted some of them, I'm now trying to complete those models for the painting challenge. So as indicated, 3 of the models have already been painted. The last 4 are now well on their way to completion. If I can find a bit of time this weekend, I'm going to try and get as much of them done as I can. I'm following the painting guide, which is in the Mad for War rulebook, which utilises contrast paints for a very quick but effective looking finish. Unfortunately, I ran out of a key colour and I've had to go and restock, so I had a few days where I couldn't do the painting because I couldn't do the next step that I wanted to work on. I had hoped to get more painting done during the week, but as I say, I've been working on other things, including the rules review, and I just run out of time. It is what it is. So that's it for this week, a relatively quick video by my standards. Please join the conversation in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share. And if you want to keep up to date with weekly content from this channel, please tap the bell notification icon. So until next week, stay safe, keep gaming, and of course, keep rolling high.